Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend and esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia. Jesse is the chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party, as well as being the vice chair of the state Republican Party. Jesse, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, sir?
I'm doing great. A lot's happened. Every day you pick up the paper, things change. Some topics stay the same on the list, but there are different developments that come flowing out of these. It's the most amazing thing in the world. The ancient Chinese curse was to live in interesting times. And Jesse, indeed, we live in interesting times. So you had this trip by the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, to go to Taiwan. And you have the president and his State Department and his Defense Department and his White House staff undermining her from going to that democratic country and saying it was not a good time, it was a bad idea. So instead of standing behind her and backing her when she's going there with a congressional delegation, they try to repudiate that visit. And what they forget is members of Congress and the Senate, including Newt Gingrich when he was Speaker, previously went to Taiwan for a visit. What's changed, Jesse, is that the leadership at the top of the Communist Party, President Xi of China, is a much more aggressive president and has greater visions of world domination than previous regimes. What say you?
I completely disagree with everything that Speaker Pelosi stands for, all of her policies. However, I do have to call this that she made the right move. She injected some backbone into the American. She has, this is a clear demonstration that we have dictatorships like President Xi, Putin, that are running on the global side with impunity, using force and using their tools and their resources to advance their totalitarian type of agenda. We've seen that, and I have to tell you, I believe it's all as a result that the world saw the failures of the Biden administration, the lack of the Biden administration's backbone in the pullout of Afghanistan. That I believe that all of these foreign policy issues that we've seen by those countries that oppose the United States and oppose freedom, they have seen all their actions are in the genesis as a result of what happened in Afghanistan.
So, Jesse, you were saying that this is a peaceful country, it's democracy, Taiwan. The previous administrations had always let, with support, congressional delegations, senators and Congress folks to go to a visit. It's never been a problem before, and is China taking advantage of the perceived weakness of the Biden administration. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's a perceived weakness, not perceived. I think it's an actual weakness of the Biden administration. They're allowing the United States to be pushed around on the global stage. We've seen China's aggressive actions and Putin's aggressive actions in Ukraine are all as a result of the failed removal and abandonment of the Afghanistan situation, earlier in this year. That's where we find the genesis of this. And you have to, like I said, I oppose all of her policies. They're wrong. All her policies are wrong for the American people. In this one act, I have to give her credit for at least standing up for for giving strength and status to American foreign policy, where Biden has been kowtowing to the Chinese and to all foreign powers since he became president.
Well, and I think another example of showing weakness to the world is the way this administration keeps begging to do an Iran deal. And I ask you this question, Jesse. When will we ever learn the mistakes that we've made before? You make a deal with Iran, they keep pushing forward, and they have secret tests and labs, underground bunkers working on nuclear weaponry. And they take all the money we give them, and then they use it to arm terrorists and become the leading sponsor of state terrorism in the world. What do you say about that?
I can't disagree with you, and that's another mistake of Biden on the global scale and in foreign policy. His actions are making us less safe. His actions are making our allies less safe. And this is why we need a Republican counterbalance to what's going on in the White House, to add some strength and some common sense to our foreign policy, our domestic policy, and all our policies here in the United States. Because right now, the globe our allies are looking at us and they can't trust us. And our adversaries are looking at us and they're seeing a weak nation that is dysfunctional because it's portraying dysfunction because of its leadership.
Well, I believe that this weakness and this delusional foreign policy really started with Obama and with Kerry. I remember watching the debate between Governor Romney and President Obama, in which Obama condescendingly ridiculed Romney and said that the Cold War was over, and not understanding that a Cold War never ends. When you have hegemonic powers, people have imperial ambitions, you constantly have to fight them on a daily basis to maintain world stability and world peace. And Obama missed the point. Romney was way ahead of the curve on that issue. He understood the threat that Russia was. Similarly, Romney understood what a threat Iran was in terms of its delusions of having world domination of a Persian empire and controlling the world based on a religion. It's incredible that they did that, but yet they did that. And they totally missed the beat in terms of the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party and their vision. Chinese Communist Party wants world domination. They're buying up, as you and I have talked about, they're buying up farmland in the United States. They're the chief producers of pharmaceuticals and medical products for the United States. They directly or indirectly, intentionally or unintentionally, caused a worldwide pandemic because of this crazy research they were doing in China that's cost 6 million people across the globe their lives. And everything is supposed to be just fine. Well, it's not just fine. Iran is a threat. China is a threat. Russia is a threat. They now have this axis of evil, as Ronald Reagan would call it, and we have to wake up and start dealing with this intelligently. What say you?
I completely agree, and I think there's a fourth peg on that stool, and that's North Korea. They are saber rattling, and they're thumbing their nose at South Korea and the United States foreign policy through their actions that are how do you describe it? You can't make one sense of it. They're not predictable, and that's the problem we have here. Is that the Biden administration has, by creating a vacuum of leadership for the United States at the global level through the Biden administration, it has allowed for these foreign powers to maneuver into positions economically, from a military point of view, from cyber attack point of view, in all platforms to try and extend their reach, either economically or militarily and diplomatically, in some, if you want to call it that way, of a small, very small d. And that's what we're having a problem, is that our allies are being surrounded and there's no leadership coming forward. There's no leadership coming forward from the United States.
Well, to use three terms or cliches, let me throw this at you. Number one, Machiavelli in The Prince very famously said, "It is better to be feared than loved." And that's absolutely correct. You can only be a player on the world stage and treated with respect if they know you have the resources and the will to act forcibly in your own defense and that of your allies. That's number one. Number two, when you have aggressive states, you need to contain them. And that's the famous George Kennan doctrine coming out of the late 1940s when President Truman was president. You have to contain evil empires and evil states that have ambitions against you. And the third is one you correctly alluded to, which is nature abhors a vacuum. When there's a vacuum of leadership, Jesse, what happens is people will move in. And if that vacuum is from naivete or weakness or corruption, the other side will move in. And I guess I'll add a fourth to that, Jesse. Great empires are destroyed first from within so that the enemies from the outside can take over. And what say you?
I completely agree, and I believe it was our great President Lincoln that said that our greatest threat came from within, that from outside. And I believe that that's one of the things we're dealing with here. And we have a ship of state that has no guidance, that has no leadership, and has no direction. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, and we believe it or not, perception is reality on the global stage and in politics. And when you have to routinely, and it's something as simple as this, when you have to routinely have your staff and your press secretary walk back and correct your statements of the leader of the free world, that's a problem. That is a problem. And when they've seen the leader of the free world hold back on his or hers assertions, that's a problem. Let's go back to the Obama administration, where the red line that President Obama continuously put forward out that said that this will be the red line and no further. He kept moving that line back because he did not engage. He did not put the full force and the might to the forefront of the United States to prevent these type of bad actors from moving around and filling vacuums. It's like, history shows us. I think it was President Roosevelt that sent, its Navy, our United States Navy around the world, a white Navy around the world to show American dominance, American ability to defend herself and freedom-loving countries and her allies. We don't have that any longer.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And you have an administration that keeps begging, as I said before, for the Iran deal and keeps setting deadlines. Well, it's almost over. We're going to take serious measures. And then that drop-dead date disappears, and they create another drop-dead date, and another drop-dead date, another drop-dead date. Meanwhile, they're not vigorously enforcing the sanctions against Iran. Money is moving and armaments are moving. There's deals between Iran and Russia to bolster Russia's illegal genocidal attack against a sovereign nation, Ukraine, an unprovoked attack. I mean, you see it, and you see that alliance, but you send out the message, well, the deadline is here. No, but it's here. No, it's here. It's here. It's here. Once you say you have a deadline, you adhere to that deadline, unless there are compelling circumstances not to, because the other side has given you something. The Iranians only take in the negotiations. They don't give. And Kerry still believes it. Kerry is the author of this policy. It's the most naive policy in the world. It's the most dangerous policy in the world. And here you have Iran with no sense of self-restraint threatening to blow up New York City. Did you see that?
Yes, absolutely.
And what would your response be if you were in the White House advising the president when Tehran says they're going to take out New York City?
They would see and feel in one capacity or another. And, things don't have to always be public. And I think that's one of the problems we've had. And I think President Trump once said this. At times, we publicize too much of our issues. There have to be sanctions that need to move forward, and we have to enforce them. But there are tools at the disposal of the president, and one of the ways we can do this, and I don't have the exact language here, but years ago, I believe in the mid-2000s, and I think it was under the Bush administration, as a way to slow down the Iranian nuclear expansion and exploration, we somehow dropped in there. It took time, surreptitiously dropped in there a virus that crippled their centrifuges. Those are the type of acts we have to start taking. Let's not be, we can't be childish here or naive that we think that that's not being done, or attempts are not being done to the United States, to its energy grid, to its military, its banking institutions, and to all of our systems. We need to take actions to slow these people down. We have those special forces. And let me just make sure I clarify one thing. When I say the United States has faltered on the world stage, it's because of its leaders. It's because of Joe Biden. It's because of his political appointees that is happening, both at the diplomatic corps and at the core economic council and at the security council. It's not the men and women of uniform who have sworn an oath and have gone through our systems to be the ground forces and the point of our spear to defend our freedoms. It's not those soldiers, not the U.S. servicemen. It's the leaders, the civilian leaders that are dictating the lack of direction for this country.
I think that's right. Jesse, Kevin just gave me the sign. We're going to be taking a break. This is the Long Island Report with Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. And when we come back, we have a very distinguished guest. We have Nick LaLota, who's running for Congress out in Suffolk County, a distinguished public servant, a graduate of Annapolis, a person who's served overseas numerous occasions for the United States. And Jesse and I are going to have the honor and privilege of chatting with him. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See RemixYogurt.com.
We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes, my gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it?
Yes.
Guarantee it?
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
We're back. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend and esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia, the Suffolk County Republican Chair and Vice Chair of the State Republican Party. And Jesse and I are honored and privileged to have Nick LaLota, who's the Chief of Staff for the Suffolk County Legislature, on the line with us. Jesse, would you be kind enough to introduce Nick to our listeners?
Sure, it's my pleasure to introduce Nick to our listeners, and I think we've mentioned a lot of his issues. But Nick LaLota is, first and foremost, is someone who's defended this country on frigates and aircraft carriers. And there are big shoes to fill in the 1st Congressional District with Lee Zeldin vacating that seat and moving up to, by the grace of God, be our next governor. But we need an Army-Navy team here. We have the Army covered with Lee Zeldin, and the Navy part of this team is Nick LaLota, who is a son of a family of law enforcement. He'll get into that. But as someone who has been we used it before, the tip of the spear to ensure voter integrity, to protect our elected officials, and ensure that our elections are secure. But more importantly, comes from a law enforcement family and has served in uniform to defend this country and our nation. And we look forward to having him defend the people of the 1st Congressional District come January down in Washington. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks for the good shout out, Chairman.
Well, there are 3 issues I'd like you to touch upon, Nick, because I think it's very important to the people of this great state and people of Long Island in the 1st Congressional District. One is the issue of border security. The second is law and order in our state and our communities. And the third, these runaway deals foisted upon the American people by Schumer, and it's the latest deal, the reconciliation bill that's gone through, the Schumer and Manchin deal. So if you talk about those three, I'd like to hear about that, and as would our listeners.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Judge. You know, our southern border needs to be sealed. It's the first and foremost thing that the next Congress needs to hold the administration accountable on. Secretary Mayorkas from Homeland Security hasn't been doing his job. It's somewhere near negligent, maybe even up to reckless, Judge. You know, this is a border, and in any other country, a border means something. Our border has to mean something. We have to stop the drugs from coming in. We have to stop the weapons from coming in. We have to stop the sex trafficking from coming in. Now, there's a legal immigration process that we've had in this country for many years. You know, I'm a fourth-generation American. You know, my great-great-grandparents came here from Sicily and from Germany and Ireland, like many other Long Islanders. And there's a legal immigration process we should follow. And the first step to that process is sealing that border. But, of course, the Republican Congress, we need to do more than just that. We need to ensure the right amount of funding to get more immigration judges to be ruling on these backlogs of immigration cases. They're taking 18, 24, and 30 months to hear. And you're having these folks who are in our country illegally stay here, remain here, while their cases supposedly get heard in a couple of years from now. The next Republican Congress absolutely needs to prioritize the funding of more federal immigration judges so that we can help clear this terrible backlog of illegals in our country.
Well, this has been a wonderful interview with Nick LaLota, the Republican candidate for Congress in the 1st Congressional District in the primary election coming up on August 23rd. Nick, I want to thank you very, very much for being on the show. Chairman Garcia and I deeply appreciate this. Your thoughtfulness, your concern, your energy, your service to this country started as a young man, as a graduate of Annapolis. You did service overseas for this country. You've had public positions out on Suffolk County. You are part of Suffolk County. You haven't just dropped in to run for office. You know and care about the people. I'm very proud to have had you on the show, and I want to thank you very, very much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Judge. I appreciate the opportunity. This is a great country, and it'll continue to be great if we all work towards that.
Okay. This is the Long Island Report. We're taking a break. We'll be back in a moment. We've just had the privilege and pleasure of speaking to Nick LaLota, who is a Republican candidate in the congressional race for the 1st District out in Suffolk County. It's held by Lee Zeldin. And we'll be right back. It's Richard Weinberg and Jesse Garcia. We'll return in just a moment. Thank you.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. I'm with my good friend and esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia, the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party, as well as the Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. We've had a very interesting discussion so far, Jesse, and we were honored and privileged to have a wonderful patriot and a public servant, Nick LaLota, who's running for Congress in the 1st Congressional District out in Suffolk County. It's an open seat, and he's, to my mind, and I'm the House Democrat, highly well qualified, high energy, great intelligence, and he understands the issues. And we were lucky to have him, and I was delighted to have somebody of that quality on our show.
Yeah, and you know what? It's a quirk in the law, and we didn't get a chance to get into it, but there's a quirk in this law where people can jump into these races this year because of redistricting and because of the judge changed the political calendar, and we had 2 primaries. But what Nick is being challenged on, he's the endorsed candidate of the Republican conservative parties. He's part of the Zeldin endorsed team to take back New York. And what's happening now is we have 2 former Democrats, a former Democrat that used to be a lawyer for both the Biden administration and the Obama administration that have somehow squirreled their way to, use the political shenanigans from Albany to file a petition and serve. And we have another Democrat, a local Democrat that served as, the chief of staff to the Suffolk County Democratic Committee here, both running in a Republican primary to try and, again, infiltrate and loosen up this seat so that it falls into Democratic hands in the November elections. And that's why this seat's so critical, because you see Democrats throughout the country, the Democratic Committee, getting former Democrats or Democrats to run in open primaries or use the existing laws of each state to scuttle into primaries just to weaken the ability for Republicans to take back the House in 2022.
And they're using great amounts of money to try to get the weakest possible candidates in November and to hurt the Republican Party's effort to have an open and fair debate on the issues. So it's very troubling. And as a Democrat, I find it absolutely reprehensible. If you believe in what you say, then you should not be trying to get yourself involved in a Republican primary and foster the weakest possible Republican candidate in that race because you think it'll be easier for the Democrat to win. It's disingenuous, it's dishonest, and it's really unfair. So let's talk about something that I'm deeply troubled about, Jesse. The Democrats in the Congress have now introduced at least two pieces of legislation, which is an attempt to establish term limits for justices of the Supreme Court. One of the bills would provide that a justice could only serve 18 years. After that, the justice would move on to a so-called senior status, and that the President of the United States would be obligated in the first year of his or her term and the third year of his or her term to nominate somebody to fill that vacancy. To my mind, number one, it's unconstitutional because if you read the Constitution, justices of the Supreme Court serve for good conduct, which has always been interpreted as a lifetime appointment. And number two, they're telling the President of the United States when he or she has to act to do something. The first and third year, why not the second or the fourth year? I mean, where do they have the audacity to tell a President of the United States, an independent constitutional officer, when he or she has to make that nomination for the Supreme Court? So I think it's defective constitutionally, and I think it's a court packing scheme. What say you?
I believe it is a court packing scheme. I believe that the Democrats in Washington and Albany are so desperate to cling on to power that they will do everything, including changing the rules to benefit themselves. Now, here's the thing. I'm a big term limit supporter. I supported term limits in the county of Suffolk. I've supported term limits statewide, and I've worked on legislation in the county of Suffolk and in the town of Brookhaven during my career. Term limits is a great thing. Number one, I agree with you. I believe it's unconstitutional by dictating, the legislature dictating to the executive of when he or she is to make these appointments. That's, I believe, infringing upon and breaking the balance of power and the triad of two branches of government. But what's important here is that, you know what, if you want to have term limits, let's have term limits. Let's have term limits so we end the 40-year members of Congress that walk in as just normal Americans, middle-class Americans, and leave as millionaires. Let's end the 40 and the 50-year tenures of members of Congress, the 40-year tenures of senators. Let's put term limits on all offices. And let's not just stop there. If we're going to have term limits, if you want term limits for judges because you don't agree with their rulings under the Constitution, well, then let's make sure we have all our state legislators, all our local offices, all our governors, all have term limits. It's time that we return this country back to its roots, where it's a citizen government, not one where elected officials use their offices for their personal profit.
Well, and the Jeffersonian ideal was just that. You came, you served, you protected the country, and then you went back to your previous life to make a living. It wasn't going back to your previous life to get $20 million book deals. It wasn't to have your son run around the world and cut all kinds of deals and influence peddle at the country's expense. It wasn't for people who worked on a salary to leave the Senate and the executive branch of government and have houses worth millions and millions and millions of dollars and all kinds of assets. And you say, how do you do that on a government salary? I know I didn't do it on a government salary. I lived on my salary, and my wife lived on her income, and we never enriched ourselves at the public's expense, and we never trafficked when I left to try to make money off of that. I've been working since I was 14 years of age, Jesse, and every day I've worked, I've tried to put in a real honest day's work, and I think our government officials should be doing the same thing.
I completely agree.
Now, let me raise another issue to you. Andrew Yang, who's a failed presidential candidate and a failed mayoral candidate here in New York City, has now come up with another gambit to make himself relevant. He now wants to create a new third party in the United States. What are your thoughts about third parties in the United States? I'm not talking about parties that fundamentally have acted as adjuncts to the major parties like the Liberal Party in New York or the Conservative Party in New York, but I'm talking about a full-blown, real party. How does that factor in your analysis?
The way it factors in analysis is that whenever a party is being created for the purposes of opposing a single individual, a single ideal, they're going to fail. Ross Perot really represented in the mid-'90s, and when he created the Reform Party and the Independence Party nationally, and then here in the state of New York, he had the idea there was a middle ground for there to be established there. And if you notice, he did run for president, but he also let go of that party to make sure it grew on its own. The people we're talking about here are never Trumpers, they're progressive Democrats, social Democrats that are looking for a place at the table and at power because they don't feel they're being listened to. And again, this is because of their own personal stake. Whether you're a progressive Democrat like Yang or one of the never Trumpers that have been from the Lincoln Project, the genesis of their reasoning is wrong because the basis of their party is wrong. So that's why a third party will not work based on those processes. We have two strong parties here and a two-party system in this country. And within each of those parties, there are different wings and there are different levels of philosophy. I believe the Republican Party is a party that truly is one that's diverse and enhances and brings in, more different opposing views than the Democratic Party. In the Democratic Party, you're excised, you're demonized if you by chance happen to be pro-life, or if you're pro independent energy and oil and fossil fuels. You're cascaded out of the party. Where our party, the Republican Party, has the ability to say, listen, as long as you mean and we all agree on the basic tenets of our party, we can move forward together.
Yeah, I will tell you from a historical point of view, in this country, the way it's worked out. Remember, we're not a multi-party parliamentary system. We're different.
No, we're not.
We're a constitutional republic. It's worked out that two parties have done fairly well in both the politics and the governance and the public policy. Every time we've had a rising third party, the way it's gone through history, it's replaced an existing party. That's number one. And so if they create another party, fundamentally, they may be trying to get a place at the table, but it's never going to be a real three-party or four-party system nationwide. It's too complicated, it's too expensive, and you don't have the support of the people to do that. If they're successful, they can only be successful by taking out one of the parties the way Abraham Lincoln's Republican Party destroyed the Whig Party. Okay, it's just the way it happens. The Progressive Party, and I don't mean the progressives today, but I mean the capital P Progressive Party, created by Teddy Roosevelt when he was annoyed at William Howard Taft, his successor as president, created something called the Bull Moose Party, the so-called Progressive Party, and all that succeeded in doing was beating the Republican, William Howard Taft, the president, and giving the election to Woodrow Wilson. And how did that work out? And Perot, right, and as Perot, as you correctly pointed out, he ran, and that cost, in my opinion, that cost the senior President Bush the election because those were basically Bush voters who were not there. Remember, Clinton only won with about 41% of the vote. So that was a real cost to George Bush Sr. All right, Kevin's giving me the sign. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back in a moment. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. This is the Long Island Report. We'll be back in a moment with the final segment for this week's show.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back for our final segment of this week's show. This is Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend, esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia, the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party, as well as being the Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. Well, Jesse, as always, it's been an interesting and compelling show. We've had a great guest, Nick LaLota, running for Congress out of the 1st Congressional District out in Suffolk County. Now, I want to talk to you about what's going on in Washington. That's, to me, very troubling. And I'm a little confused by this bill, and I have to say, I'll just put out the discussion, and I can't tell you whether, in my opinion yet, it's a good idea or a bad idea. One of the problems we have is that the United States, as you and I have talked about, we're not energy independent. Another problem is we rely both on the pharmaceuticals as well as the component parts of medical equipment and supplies and ingredients to foreign powers, including China. Another one that's very, very important is our dependency on chips. Now, chips are important. Why do you need chips? Because if you have this obsession with the Green New Deal, Jesse, and you want to have electric cars all over, and you want to get rid of fossil fuels, how are you going to run cars without the chips? And who makes the chips? Taiwan makes the chips, Jesse. Taiwan makes the chips, and the other chips are made by China and India. So what does that mean? It means that if you don't have chip independence, you're in a real threat to not having transportation in the United States. So the argument then becomes, well, the chip bill is a good idea, they say, because this will be a step forward to having chip independence for the United States, which is an idea which, by the way, I subscribe to. The arguments against it, Jesse, seem to be as follows. Number one, why do you have to subsidize the chip manufacturers in this country? Because they're awash in cash. They've made a lot of money. They have enough money to do it on their own. That's one argument. And then the other argument is what this bill does is not nearly enough to make us chip independent. All it would be is a holding action for the current chip manufacturing in the United States, not enough to make us chip independent. Your thoughts?
I think you're right. I think that, number one, I do believe that if we want to take this action to protect our industries, we either do it like President Trump did. He did it at the trade table with China. He stared China down. He put forth tariffs on their goods and such so that it made it economically infeasible for them to engage in this trade warfare and the stealing of intellectual property. We need those type of actions to be taking place. As you pointed out, the spending that we're doing here, the subsidizing of these chip companies, number one, the phone that we use, the car that we drive, the Apple Pen that we utilize, all have chips in them. And these companies are doing well, then they need to step up to protect their own industries and their own interests. But this is Democrats again, and we'll get into it in a little bit later about the so-called Inflation Act. It's just throwing more money at a problem where we should have a public-private partnership, where the private entities are the ones that invest their monies, and at the public level, we have our economic diplomats at the trade tables making sure that there is the stealing of our intellectual properties and we utilize our trade tools to ensure the sovereignty of our manufacturers here in this country. Number one, if we want to do something, how about we remove a bunch of regulations, reduce a couple of property taxes and taxes in general, so that these companies can thrive and hire people, the best and the brightest, so we can take the next steps in the next generation of chip development.
Well, Jesse, that was a very compelling analysis, and it's a very good segue to the next thing I want to discuss with you. Because there's this bill, it's a so-called reduced inflation bill, which is totally Orwellian because it doesn't reduce inflation. It will only be inflationary because every time you start spending more government money, you're printing more money, you're putting more money in circulation, it's inflationary. This bill also has more taxes, It has more spending for more new Green New Deal projects for, the favored nations of the Democratic Party. They're very compelling, and you hit upon this. It will penalize U.S. manufacturing by overregulating and overtaxing industries that you say that you want to be competitive on the world stage. And these are some very dangerous things that they're doing, as well as it could be, in a fair way, be perceived as also an attack on the pharmaceutical industry. It's going to chill research and development in the pharmaceutical industry. How would you have had Trump's successful fight against this virus that came from China if you didn't have this public-private partnership that you talked about that gave us this warp speed bill and legislation and deal that got us going to protect not only the population of the United States, but the population of the world? What do you say?
I completely agree. I mean, I'm hoping that during these deliberations, as they're ongoing right now, that Senator Sonoma of Arizona, who's a centrist Democrat, a conservative Democrat, her and Manchin have held back on the big Build Back Better boondoggle bill that Biden has proposed, that she holds out and she holds out. I'm also hoping that the parliamentarian of the states of the U.S. Senate illustrates that the text of this bill does not fall under reconciliation, which I believe that there are those scholars who believe that there is a problem in how and about and what they're trying to achieve through reconciliation. They're trying to move this out just as we speak on as they go before August recess. But here's the thing: here on Long Island, income taxes are going to go up on each family that makes under $400,000 a year. That is a big number, but all of our families, all of middle-class families, fall under that number here on Long Island. We're dealing with high cost of groceries. We're dealing with high cost of gas. We're dealing with high cost of all services, medical, everything. And now the government is the Democrats in Washington are imposing an additional tax. At the same time, this boondoggle, the bill, is going to cost at a minimum 30,000 jobs. This is not an anti-inflation bill. This is a boondoggle that's going to set aside, that's going to hurt the very people they're trying to help. But you put it on you nailed it on the head. They're not trying to help the average New Yorker, the average Long Islander, or the average American. They want to reward their political allies in the Green New Deal industries so that they can take a victory lap and get even more subsidies than they've already been given under the Biden administration and the Obama administration.
I think this bill is a very dangerous bill. It's going to be very, very harmful. It will be inflationary. It will create more impetus to Green New Deal, which, by the way, if you remember the Solyndra fiasco, that fell apart. Obama pushed. He did press conferences. He did a walking tour, how wonderful this was. But Solyndra was bankrupt. It was a failure. How many billions of dollars of taxpayers' money was lost? And Solyndra was just the tip of the iceberg. The Green New Deal, a wonderful theoretical idea. We're decades and decades and decades and decades and decades away from having the technology to do it. You don't do it by abolishing fossil fuels. You do it by having diverse sources of energy. If you don't have diverse sources of energy, Jesse, you have no civilization. How is everything going to run? Your lights, your cars, your transportation, planes, anything, manufacturing of food, medical supplies, medical equipment, clothing. I mean, what are they talking about? They come up with these theories. They're wonderful when you talk about it in a classroom as a point-counterpoint debate, but they do not work in the real world. And talking about what doesn't work in the real world, here's the Biden administration, in the most Orwellian of Orwellian ways, says as follows, that we are not in a recession because this is not a recession. Well, the classical definition of a recession is 2 successive quarters of diminished gross development, national growth. That's what you have, 2 successive GDP down. And that's what you had now, and they're telling us it's not a recession. And they trot out the Secretary of Treasury, who's supposed to know better, a woman primarily of great reputation historically, and what has she done? she's mouthing this ridiculous thing. Well, the recession is not a recession, is not a recession. What say you, Jesse?
What say me is I expect politicians, especially those with failed policies, to do everything they can to deflect from their failures. However, where is our mainstream media? The one that is supposed to hold the feet to the fire of these elected officials. If this is the Donald Trump administration trying to say there was no recession, or if this what they would attack Donald Trump when projections of new job growth at a historic economy did not meet by a 0.01% of his projection, they would attack him as a failure. Here, the mainstream media, because their big corporate bosses are in the pockets of the Democrats, they stay silent. But the Americans feel it. New Yorkers feel it. My neighbors in Suffolk County and Long Island, they feel it whenever they go to the gas pump, when they go to the grocery store, when they have to, get ready. And we have to get all our school supplies back. And for our kids, we're going to feel it there too. There's no area where our middle-class families here in Suffolk County, Long Island, New York are not feeling the failures of these Democratic policies.
Well, Jesse, it's been another great show. I want to thank you very much. I look forward to getting together with you for our breakfast on Saturday, and I look forward to doing the show again with you next week. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Long Island Report with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg, signing off for this week, and we look forward to chatting with you again next week. Thank you.